like to thank you all for coming to this morning's event, Life with Flowers, the book talk with Frances Palmer. I'm Erin Searcy, AVP for Continuing Education. And as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the New York Botanical Garden is located in the ancestral homeland of the Lenape, Delaware people. We honor them and acknowledge their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. In addition to today's program, the New York Botanical Garden offers many classes, workshops, and public lectures in landscape design, floral design, gardening, and more. I'd like to highlight 2 upcoming lectures this summer. NYBG's Richard Smith and Professor Jarvis McInnes will discuss McInnes's research on the agrarian South and his book, Afterlives of the Plantation, on June 18th, right here in the Mertz Library. And on August 12th, botanical artist and historian Giovanni Alloy will present his latest book, Botanical Revolutions, in an online lecture. You can find more information about those lectures and other things on our website. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing Frances Palmer, a self-taught potter, photographer, gardener, and longtime friend of NYBG, who has been living and working in Weston, Connecticut for over 35 years. Frances loves flowers, especially dahlias, and has an amazing cutting garden she keeps for inspiration and subject matter for her photos. Her Dauntless Dahlias workshop at NYBG is one of our most popular classes. Trained as an art historian, Frances studies the history of plants as well as ceramics and how the two intertwine. She doesn't just plant a flower in the garden, she researches the flowers and she selects thoroughly. This morning, Frances will share her passion for flowers, growing, designing, and arranging them with us throughout the seasons, as presented in her beautiful, newly released book, Life with Flowers. If you haven't done so already, you can purchase a copy of the book after this lecture, and Frances will be signing books in the rotunda downstairs on the 4th floor immediately after her talk. There is another lecture after this one, busy day in here, and so we encourage you, yes, to go down to the 4th floor and continue the conversation there, and Frances will be signing books, as I mentioned. So please take a moment to silence your cell phones and join me in welcoming Frances Palmer to the lectern.
It's such an honor to be here. I love the NYBG. I've been teaching here since 2015, the Dahlias class, twice a year. I love this library. They have the most extraordinary collection and botanical exhibitions, and so it's really special for me to be here, and thank you all for taking the time to come. I know it's always hectic, so it's great. And my first book came out in 2020, and I did an online Zoom talk, and ever since then, when I'm able to speak to people in person, I never take that for granted, because it was such a challenging time to be giving talks into the cosmos, not knowing who is there. So I'm so happy to see all of your faces. And I'm very honored that my editor, Bridget Monroe Itkin, who helped me do this new book and the first book, is here. So I was asked to do the first book by Leah Ronan, who is the publisher at Artisan Books. And after I finished that book and it came out, she then asked me to do a book that focused more on the flowers that I grow for my ceramics. So this is sort of the incarnation about how we got started with the second book. The second book is sort of a companion to the first book, and it really talks about how I think about growing the flowers. I didn't really want it to be a how-to book, because I'm not a gardener in the sense that I help other people do their gardens. It's very much my own process, and I'm very bad at keeping track of what I plant, how things go. I keep absolutely no records. Everything is always a complete surprise, and so it was really a challenge for me to put this book into some sort of an organization, which is hence where Bridget steps in. And because I think of the garden more like a tapestry and a kind of an interweaving of things coming into bloom, going out to bloom, we came up with this idea of dividing the book into 6 seasons versus the usual spring, fall, summer, fall, winter. So that, and I just kind of loved the sound of these different seasons. So you have pre-vernal, which we could call early spring, vernal, which is spring, estival and serotonal, which are the summer months, autumnal, and then hibernal. And so again, and it's not really very strict in that sense, but I just kind of we had to put some kind of order to my thinking. My friend Erin Benzakein from Floret Flower very kindly wrote the foreword, and I really wanted to put this photo in opposite because this was one of the last photos I took last year, and this again exemplifies what I was trying to say, because in this photo you have chrysanthemums which start in November, but you still have the roses were still blooming. I still had nasturtiums, and I can just see all the different things that I kind of plucked to be in there, the salvias, the cosmos, and that to me is what I think about when I go out into the garden and I look and see what's blooming, and then I put it all together in one of my vessels. And then, so then I start to talk about in the book, how did I come to gardening? How did I think about gardening? And for me, growing the flowers, as Erin said, that it's not just about the flower. There's always so many associations for flowers with me. And of course, the earliest one I always think about was one of my favorite books, which is Alice in Wonderland. And here Alice is talking to all the flowers in the garden, and they're talking back. And I mean, I'm sure you all kind of feel the same way. You go out and you look at the flowers and they're kind of talking back to you. So I was really adamant about growing this lily, and you can see the butterflies are on it. So these early associations are always so important. And another book, when I was a teenager, we had a great old used bookstore in Morristown, New Jersey, and you could go get these first editions for $0.25. And I still have this first edition copy, which is quite battered, of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. And what I love best about this book is the way she described the garden, and it was the kind of the first idea that gardens could have mystery to them. And so there's this chapter in the book where she's going out into the garden, so she grabs a Macintosh off the hook, and she realizes when she pulls out the handkerchief with Rebecca's initial on it that she's put on this Macintosh that belonged to the first wife. And the scent of the azaleas, that was like the echo of this person who had died. And she had all these fantasies about what this woman was, which had no relationship to reality. But anyway, I just love that idea of scent and flower and everything conjuring up all these ideas. And then when I was in college, I went to Barnard and Columbia. One of my great experiences was helping the photography curator at the Met, who was Weston Neff, who went on to do the photography collection at the Getty in Los Angeles. He asked me to catalog all the Julia Margaret Cameron photos. And I just always empathized with them. And here is a photo of Julia Jackson, who was Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell's mother. And so fast forward, I've gotten through undergraduate, graduate school. I had various jobs in the art world, but I was always making art myself. And then I had a baby, and we moved out to Connecticut, where we're still living in Weston, Connecticut. And I was ill-equipped to be a mother. I'd never seen a baby in my life. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, and in the dead of winter, we brought her home on Christmas Day. And it was quite an adjustment for me. So my husband said to me, "Why don't you try doing something you've always wanted to try?" And I was thinking about this beautiful farmhouse in Sussex that is called Charleston, and is still, it's now a museum today, but it's where Vanessa Bell lived, and Clive Bell and Duncan Grant and all these artists around World War I that wanted to be conscientious objectors. And they were these incredible artists that painted absolutely everything. They did the walls, they did the paintings, they did the ceramics, they did the furniture. And it just inspired me and said, well, I'm going to make ceramics. So I signed up for a throwing class in New Canaan, Connecticut, and quickly set up my own studio. And again, this, if you can see the tea caddy in the back on the right, this is what I was thinking of when I made the shape. So everything I make has some kind of reference. This is the kitchen at Charleston, which is very much like it is today. If you walked in there, where you can see the pottery that they made, and they painted the kitchen table, they painted the fireplace cover, all the plates on the above the fireplace, and also the geraniums. So this kind of connection between ceramics and gardening and flowers and home was very integral to my practice. So the first pieces I made were all painted in reference to the Charleston ceramics, but I quickly decided I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to focus on the form and the shape. So these are some of the first pieces that I started making, thinking about. I just love the act of forming the clay into different shapes. And but very early on, I realized that since I wanted to do functional work, I had to learn how to do photography so that I could document everything before it left the studio. And what better way to give some kind of scale to the piece is to put flowers in it. And that was my impetus for learning to grow flowers. This is the garden of the painter Cedric Morris and his bearded iris, which he bred. He died in the 1980s, but in the 1940s and 50s were kind of his heyday. And this is a painting that's in the Tate Museum of his bearded iris. And these were the sort of things I was thinking and looking at when I was starting to conceive of making a garden. This is another garden I admire. This is the foxglove closed an area of Rousham, which is in Oxfordshire, if anybody's ever been there. It's a stunning landscape that was first designed in the 1670s and still very much the same as it is today, and the same family owns the property. And so when I was starting to think about what am I going to grow in the garden and what kind of flowers do I want for my vases, I visited this garden in 1998. Sadly, it doesn't exist anymore. That's a very fancy garden called the Newt, which wins all sorts of awards. But this garden was completely destroyed after this couple died, Sandra and Nori Pope. But what I loved best about their gardening idea was something very new to me, which was to garden by color. And so they had 2 or 3 books that I have, and you could look at all the flowers that they grow or grew that were red, or the flowers that were yellow. And this was really great because I always think about colors and how to put them all together, and you would go into these different garden rooms that they had on their property, which were all, like, one was all red and one was all white, and I'm not that organized, but it was still a great inspiration for me. Like, if I wanted a red flower, I would go and look and see what they had in these books. This is another place that I was so lucky to visit a couple years ago, Great Dixter, and it's under the stewardship of Fergus Garrett, who's absolutely genius. And I got to stay in the house and get up in the morning and kind of wander around the gardens before anybody was there. It was really heaven. And so again, looking at all the flowers that he grows, I'm constantly looking, thinking, and so I have 2 gardens at my house currently. This is the first one that I put in, which is like a 50-foot diameter garden with 16 square foot beds. And it's filled primarily with dahlias, but over time I've put in a lot more annuals, and more natives are coming in, perennials. I have old roses on the side. And then the other garden, here's another shot from my 2nd floor studio, and this is sort of at its peak in September, and you can see all the sunflowers and the amaranths, and so there's a lot of different material, but everything has to function for cutting. And then I kind of go through in the book, sort of season, as I said, those 6 seasons, what flowers are contained in those each seasons and how you can grow them. This is the other garden that I have, which is on a tennis court that we have on the property. When we first moved in, all the fencing had fallen down. It was originally built in the 1930s, and our kids were young, so we put up new fencing and a new net, and we paved it, and we thought, fabulous. But nobody played tennis. It was the scandal of Weston that I had a tennis court and didn't play. So So eventually I just started putting raised beds on there. So now I have about 30 raised beds. I took down the net and just gave in to the chaos. So, and it's great because it has this huge fence and the deer can't get in. And I also have 4 beehives. It would be like in the corner just behind this shot. And here's another shot of the garden. So things get quite lush up there. It's so nice and warm and sunny. And I put in drip irrigation. So otherwise the water, we're on a well, so we have to be very conservational. This is my studio, which you can see the tennis court is off to the left, and that round garden, that first garden, is off to the right. And this is the tennis court, the studio in relationship to, this is the back of the property. So the studio is right close by, which is so convenient because I'm literally going out at all times of the day and night to check on the pots or the firing. And so then we get to the flowers. So this is a shot of one of the first flowers. And I try really hard during the winter months not to go buy flowers, but sometimes you just have to. But these are all mine. So those are the first hellebores and the daffodils and the witch hazel. And I talk a lot about hellebores and all the different colors that you can grow and how to think about them in a vase. And then moving on. So when we were talking about making the book, first I thought, I'll just go and get like different kinds of glass or different kinds of vases for people to see different options. But then I thought, well, no, I'm not going to do that because that's not how I think about the flowers. I'm always thinking about the flowers in relationship to the work. So I thought I'm just going to stick to that plan. So all the vases in the book are mine, but hopefully just the shapes give people ideas about what to do. So this is another group of early spring bulbs. These are all the different kinds of fritillaria. You've got imperialis and persica and meleagris, and these are such great, easy things to plant in the fall and just give you such a reward in the spring. The witch hazels, I've been putting in numerous kinds of witch hazels. And where else has great, I'm sure you have great witch hazels here. And they have the most glorious scent, like that scent that says spring is definitely on its way. And so I really look to that. And I love to use them just to bring them in and put them inside. And then once the flowers have dried, you can put them in a tincture and use them again as that as well. Or I put them on a table with the early daffodils. And and then for example, this is Coreopsis, which blooms just after the witch hazel. It's actually a type of witch hazel. And then once the blooms are spent, I use the stems as stakes for the sweet peas. So I try to repurpose everything. And then I'm thinking a lot, as I said, I did that great internship at the Met. So I'm always thinking about photography. I love this photo. This is one of Henry Fox Talbot. So in 1839, there were dueling photography processes. There was Henry Daguerre in Paris, who came up with the daguerreotype, and Henry Fox Talbot in England, who came up with the paper negative. But what I love about this particular shot here, this is they dated 1840, 1849. What is he taking a photo of? Flowers in a bowl, dahlias in a bowl. So I feel that this is a theme that artists have explored for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Egyptians, Greek, everybody was interested in flowers and vases. This is a daguerreotype. They don't really know who this person is, but again, I feel this is completely contemporary. It has all sorts of great plant material, dahlias, sunflowers, and I just love the height of it. So I'm often researching the flowers that I grow and thinking about how to do them. Another person, a great inspiration, is Giorgio Morandi for a couple reasons. One, I love the shapes of the vases that he paints, so I'm always thinking about those, but I'm also thinking about how he arranges his objects together. So I'm always thinking about how to put the vessels and the flowers together in a photo. And then, of course, the classic Dutch still life, which one can see at the Met, or I'm sure there are some here as well. This is from 1665, and they're kind of fantastical because oftentimes they're putting together flowers that really don't bloom at the same time, but it's kind of irrelevant. So I love that kind of huge bouquet and wildness. So getting back to the bulbs, if I'm planting a bulb, I try to run the gamut of the different shapes and colors that it's offered, like the dahlias, like the tulips. I like to have a range of options to cut and bring in. This is a shot that's in the book of this great ombre arrangement, and then here's a photo that I took. It was a really dark early February morning, and the light was just coming in the window from the right, so it was that very kind of cool winter light. And I was thinking about this great painter, this Danish painter, Wilhelm Hammerskøi, who painted around 1900, and all of his interiors were very kind of cool and blue and gray. It's often his wife standing by a window. They're very tranquil. And so that was kind of in my brain when I was taking that photo. And then again, back to the still life. So this was sort of a whole group of all the different bulbs blooming at the same time, just kind of capturing. And then these were some wood vases that just came out of the kiln. And then back to the idea of planting. And in the book, I do give, I try to give like my favorites of each type, for example, but there's so many options, and that's what I try to say. You don't have to be wedded to what I'm thinking about, but the idea is just to have this whole option of color, range, height, shape, and form, and when you're thinking about what do you want to put in the ground, and then kind of combining everything. So here are some of the hyacinth blooming, and the forsythia, and the daffodils, and the hellebores. And if you're just going out into your garden and seeing what you have there and just putting it all together, it's kind of hard to go wrong. I talk about in the book, years, I guess it must have been around 15 years ago, they had a great exhibition up at the British Center at Yale, up in New Haven, of an artist named Mary Delaney. She was English, and she, in the 1778, she was 72, and she decided she wanted to do cut paper flowers, and they are absolutely genius. Most of them are in the British Museum. I'm sure there's some here, and I think if you make appointments, you can come and look at all their beautiful collection here. But yeah, these are amazing, and so I had to grow auriculas in her honor, and kind of emulate that sort of sensibility. But then I was a couple years ago, I was at Sissinghurst, and even here at the NYBG, they have this great conceit called the Auricula Theater, where it's I can point to where it is. It's right over there every spring, where they make a wooden shelf theater, otherwise known as a theater, and they put out all their auriculas. And I had seen this shelf at Sissinghurst Castle Gardens, and I didn't have a tape measure with me, but I used my phone and went 4 phones across, 2 phones deep, 6 phones high, and I quickly came back home and called my friend who's a woodworker and said, "You must make me this auricula theater." So here's my auricula theater, and the pots I made and the auriculas, and I was so happy but you should come and see the auricula theater here because it's really wonderful. And again, in the first book, I had some recipes, so we wanted to include some recipes in this one. And of course, what can be more joyful than flower cookies? So I always have this great bed of violets that blooms. But in this photo, I have primulas. Of course, you want to make sure that the plant material that you're using is not poisonous. So if you have any question, you have to check it out. But I rest assured that all these flowers are edible, and the recipes in the book, it's pretty fun, and it's a great thing to do with children. So again, getting back to the seasons and how I present them in the book, so I try to think about, strategize. So I put those tulip bulbs in the fall, but I knew where I would be putting the tomato cages for the dahlias. So if you have a space, we talk a little bit about how to think about where you're putting the flowers, in terms of height and time of bloom and all sorts of things like that. So, and again, back to the idea that I try to go deep on every flower that I plant so that I have lots of options, and it changes every year. And as I mentioned, I keep terrible records, so I can, if I don't take a photo, I really can't remember what it is I've planted. I mean, that's like always my fear on Instagram when people go, oh, what kind of rose is that? And I'm like, if I've lost the plant tag, I'm doomed. So anyway, this is just a way of showing, again, the wonderful option of having all different colors and all different, these are all species tulips and lily tulips that have those great slender stems. Thinking about, again, the photography, this is one of my favorite photos by André Kertész from 1939, where he manipulated the negative. I'm not really quite sure how he did it, but he had just come from Europe. He had escaped during World War II, and he was very melancholy. So he did this tulip, which is great because it does, I feel, talk so much about the mood that he was in. And then this is a great one by Lee Friedlander from 1994. He had damaged his knee, so he was sedentary for a long time, and he started staring at all the tulip stems. And I thought that was really great. It's kind of like Morticia Addams taking all the rose tops off and just keeping the thorns. So again, just thinking about that when I'm doing the photography. And another great person who did early cyanotype is Anna Atkins, and there was a great exhibition of her at the New York Public Library a couple years ago. So just thinking about how she looks at the flowers and these Jack in the Pulpits. So I try to translate what I'm staring at into, or just examining these lily of the valley and focusing on the flower itself. So this is one of the great old azaleas that was on the property, going back to my homage of Daphne du Maurier, but this blooms really gloriously every May, and the bearded iris, which I keep adding to, and combining them, just walking around and putting them together and taking advantage of what's just happening. And here's another Cedric Morris from Bentonen and his glorious bearded irises. And then these two pieces that I think are quite extraordinary, the iris paper brush from 1645, and then this photograph by Charles Jones from around 1905. And so I went to a lot of trouble to get this archival material into the book so that it's not just about talking about the flowers, but talking about other things that I think about as the flowers are planted. And again, just documenting all the different colors and how absolutely exquisite they are. And just moving on to the peonies, which I have just finished in my garden, and the foxglove, which volunteer, and just how I can go out and cut them and bring them together, or just keep them simple in a bowl. And then the viburnum is blooming, and I know some of you are coming to the flower arranging class later, so we'll talk more about this. But just bringing all the different material that you find, things that you probably wouldn't necessarily consider to be put in a vase that you probably have around your property, that can be brought into play. Again, the combination of the bearded iris and the peonies and the viburnum and the early roses are starting. And then we move on. So on the tennis court, I've been putting in a lot of David Austin roses because they keep blooming. And I do have old roses in the round garden, but it made me sad that they only bloomed once. So I just, over the years, I've been adding more and more of the David Austin. They're really rewarding because they go on till frost. And I have them in flower pots running down the length of the tennis court, but I've realized that they really like being in the garden beds. So I've been gradually moving them into the beds, which gives me less room for the dahlias, but I'm trying to squash everything in. And then again, thinking about some of these beautiful rose photographs. This is from Edward Steichen in 1914, where he was sort of mourning all the deaths and the war in World War I. or Tina Modadi, who was a revolutionary an Italian who moved to Mexico with the photographer Edward Weston. And then this is, thinking about those photos, this is a photo of Constance Spry roses. I think this is in my first book. But back to the growing and back to the tennis court, I talk a lot about randomness, and I don't believe in weeds. I don't believe in mistakes. These are cracks in the tennis court that have opened up over time because we aren't using it as a tennis court, and I kind of just sort of embrace whatever comes out there and let everybody do its thing. Like one year I had a great display of hollyhocks. So every year it's different, and they're just so beautiful. So, and then I put them with the foxglove and the viburnum. And then I try to talk about some of the flowers that aren't necessarily in fashion, things that you can plant. Well, this is a photo of the hollyhocks with the roses and the lilies, and I do love the lilies. So, and another project that's in there is a kind of riffing off the cyanotype. This is called an anthotype, and this is a great project to do with kids. So instead of using the cyanotype emulsion, it's an emulsion for processing that you make with flowers and grain alcohol, and you kind of mash it up with a mortar and pestle, and you so that red, that kind of fuchsia background I made with geranium flowers and grain alcohol, and then you wash it onto the paper, and then you put the flowers on top and you expose it in the sun, and then you get these great kind of unpredictable results, which are really fun for the kids to see. So then moving on into the course of the season, I'm talking about the poppies, annual and perennial, and then vines that you can plant that are great for material for vases, and just putting the passion flower in the vase so that you can just see. I just love that the petals of the passion flower kind of echoed what was happening in the vase. And then talk a lot about the lilies, because lilies are so great. You put them in the garden once and they come back every year. Very low work. As long as it's protected, you have to protect them in a fenced-in area because the deer will eat them immediately. But they are so glorious, and the fragrance is incredible. They're great for the bees. They're great for the hummingbirds. Love them, and they're all coming out now. A lot of times you have to stake them if they get really tall, but other than that, they're pretty trouble-free. And the other thing is they do get those red lily beetles, but I literally just go around and pull them off and then squash them, throw them on the ground and step on them. And, I don't use chemicals or things like that on the flowers. And then, again, referencing historically, this is this great hand-colored lily photograph from 1896 by the Japanese photographer Kazumasa Ogawa, and then thinking about the lilies that I had and sort of referencing that photo. And gladiolas kind of went out of fashion, but there's, again, a really easy corm to plant, very inexpensive. They do come back every year, but I always add them, and they're such a great cut flower, and they bear absolutely no resemblance to the commercial ones that you buy in the market. They just are so much more delicate and wonky, and you can stake them or not stake them, and they're just a great, glorious height to an arrangement, and they go on for a long time. So then you can see I didn't stake these, the kind of the wonky stem, and I think that's great. Then delphiniums. This is my aspirational flower, and this is a photo by Edward Steichen, and who lived about 5 miles from me in Easton, Connecticut, and he bred these. And this is a photo at the Museum of Modern Art that he brought in to display all of his delphiniums, which is quite extraordinary. And so some of my photos in homage to that. And then moving on to the late summer, where you get those great hydrangeas and putting them in with the dahlias. and sunflowers. So I'm kind of talking about all of these different flowers for you to think about and how they can work in your garden. And putting them, I have this grapevine on the tennis court that I rarely get grapes because the birds eat them, but I grabbed these before they got eaten and put them in with the sunflowers. And there's different kinds of rudbeckia, and it just is like one of those great, glorious summer displays. Marigolds, I'm a big fan of marigolds, and they have a great scent. You can use them for dyeing. I have a dye project in there, very simple, where you get 100% linen or cotton napkins and immerse them in a bath of marigold petals, and then you get these kind of glorious napkins that you can use. But you can use all sorts of flowers, but these are the ones I talk about in the book. And amaranths, this is the one on the left is called hot biscuits, and the birds literally sit on the flowers and eat the seeds, but then they're a great cut flower because they give a lot of structure and hold up all the other flowers because I don't use a lot of mechanics in the vases. And again, another photo that I love to think about with growing the zinnias. This is Charles Sheeler from 1915. And then these are some shots of the garden in September where everything is kind of going. And everything is coming along nicely this year. And then the dahlia season. How are we doing on time? We're good. I did talk a lot about dahlias in my first book, so we don't go quite so deep this time. But I do give a little bit of information about that and how they work with all the different the gladiolas and some of the volunteers that are coming in, and the gladiolas and the amaranths. And I love to grow those dahlias that have that reflexive black back so that the back looks as great as the front. And talk about color, lots of people don't like yellow, but I've become a big fan of yellow. And lots of coleus leaves that have all those great variegated lines to them. And then get into it would be like September, October, where I talk about the natives. And asters are a great plant to have for that late season blue. And they're all different shades of asters. There's anemones and still roses, and of course the dahlias. So that makes a great display. And then some more natives, the helianthus and the goldenrod can be immersed in with all the regular zinnias and dahlias and hydrangea. And then moving on to November with the chrysanthemums, and the chrysanthemums have to go, the Japanese chrysanthemums come into the greenhouse, but I've been also growing perennial chrysanthemums that can stay outside all winter, which is great. So I have kind of both going now. And again, just the idea of having all different kinds of colors and shapes and sizes because they all work so beautifully together. And then here's all sorts of citrus trees that I move into the greenhouse in the wintertime, but now they're outside for their summer vacation. And but yet, always great to cut them when it's time to harvest them and put them in a vase. So everything gets used. Geraniums, I talk a lot about geraniums, and the winter, and the bulbs and the flowers that you can grow in the winter, the paper whites and now the name just went right out of my brain, the amaryllis and the jasmine, that's what I'm looking for. All these things that kind of get you through the winter months, and the orchids that talk up there. And of course you can always come to the orchid show here if you need your fix of orchids. And the amaryllis for the holidays. And in the back of the book I have resources that have tools and different plant suppliers and bulb suppliers, and things like that to kind of help you get yourself situated. And then I took this the other day. The roses are blooming now on the tennis court, and the lilies are starting, and all the annuals are going, and I'm really excited about another growing season, another growing year. So that's it.